One of the more powerful realizations I've had, both in business and life overall, is that what we do to win today and what we do to position ourselves to win tomorrow, they're often very different things. And we've probably all experienced this in some capacity. We get sucked into the cycle of doing, becoming so task-oriented that we don't make time to step back and ask, which direction do I want this ship to go? Because sure, we have to keep it afloat, and we have to keep it afloat now. But also, we have to navigate. The ship's role isn't solely to float, right? It's a transportation mechanism, a vehicle. Where are we going? And so the question becomes, how do we balance the two? I came across an awesome book by Lee Benson called Your Most Important Number. And I'm about halfway through, but already finding a ton of value that I'll be sharing in the future, primarily around positioning your business for success. And one of the first things the book discusses is the difference between what Lee calls eating and dreaming. Eating being the things we need to do now, to take care of matters that are essential for today, the things that need to get done. So using the same metaphor, actions to keep that boat afloat. And then there's the dreaming, which is essentially doing things now that help position the organization for success in the future, down the road. It's asking, what can I do today that will ensure we are winning tomorrow? So boat metaphor, it's planning for storms that may arise later in the journey. It's analyzing the best destinations and charting the course. And here's what really struck me. Lee suggests, based on his consulting, that ideally leaders should be, I believe the number was 80% dreaming and 20% eating. So yeah, doing what has to be done today, obviously, but largely focused on positioning the organization and themselves for success in the days to come. And what he's found is that very often out in the world, that ratio is flipped. People are so consumed by the day-to-day that the future takes a back seat to the nuance and the quote-unquote putting out fires of the present moment. We're spending 80% of our time eating. Now, like most things, this is not one size fits all. Say frontline manager at a factory is not going to be 80% dreaming and 20% eating. Their task requirements are different. But the point remains, it's imperative that we, in some capacity, utilize our resources now to look ahead. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I always joke around with my brother about it. When we were kids in Southern California, we'd have these basically battles on the beach, right? Where we'd go down to the hard sand right in front of the water, and we'd each build these little wall/fort type things, maybe 20 feet apart from each other. This is like emulating World War I type stuff. And then we'd make cannonballs out of sand and just throw the sand at each other. Right, so in a way, this is a perfect metaphor because we would always be juggling, on one hand, building the fort that would protect us from the other person, so dreaming. And then on the other hand, I mean, those things hurt, right? We'd have to, in real time, be dodging incoming sand simultaneously to building that wall, right? So the eating. And he's a bit younger than me, so admittedly, this wasn't really fair. But regardless, he would get so consumed with throwing sand that his wall would be really cheaply made. At the beginning, I'd be trying to make this really solid base foundation, and he would just be pelting me with this stuff, and it was brutal. But as time went on, I'd build that wall higher and higher, and eventually it would be lights out for him. He'd have nothing to hide behind. The young buck was doing, let's say, way less than 80% dreaming. And so I'm no longer building castles in the sand. But as Thoreau said, now I'm looking to build them in the air, seeking to bring things into life that are merely ideas and concepts in my head. And naturally, this prompted me to ask, well, what's my ratio now? Because it sure feels like I'm doing a lot of eating. It sure feels like I spend a lot of time every day, dodging Mikey P's incoming sand cannonballs, right? Things are going to be different tomorrow than they are today. And to truly win, we need to be asking ourselves, how do we build that bridge from the present to the future? How do we lay out stepping stones that will allow an evolution in what we're doing? And I'm thinking, if my day's 95% consumed with eating type tasks, then I need to figure things out here, right? Is it automate? Is it eliminate? Is it delegate? It's something, because the ship needs to be more effectively captained. And I love these epiphanies. Just a change in mindset that can completely redirect one's entire trajectory. And it's funny, I was having a conversation earlier today with a friend about scaling and impact and growth. Another person I love to throw ideas back and forth to. And he asked me, well, Eddie, what are some of the ways your world within could make money? And I was like, oh, it's easy, right? And so I laid it all out in great detail, the ins and outs. And he says, that's awesome. But that's not the question I asked you. You answered a different question. You answered, how is the business making money now? I asked, how can it make money in the future? Boom, another epiphany. One of those instances where you catch yourself thinking small. And this isn't a knock on the work I'm doing now or the systems in place now. They're great now, but again, now isn't forever. If you have plans to add more value and create more impact, build more things, that has to be baked into your time and resource allocation. We all have to eat because we don't want to starve, but we also have to dream. Because if we're unable to look ahead, we simply will not be equipped to handle the turbulence of tomorrow, right? There's a duality to this game. And I think the ratio with which we're juggling the two deserves consistent attention and examination. Now, yeah, life is seasonal. There are times where keeping that ship afloat takes everything we have. But it's understanding that that is a season and not the way things are. Dreaming allows us to start moving in the right direction, even if it's one small step at a time. Building today piece by piece, something we can stand on tomorrow, a staircase to the version 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0. The future depends on what we do today, and so we must create space for that seed to grow. We must chart the course and captain the ship to the next horizon. I recently heard someone say, it's not about doing your best, it's about doing what's required. Are they different? Very. Here's my take. Doing your best has an emotional component attached to it. It's subjective. What exactly is your best? Well, it's a story that you tell yourself. A narrative opening the door to limitation. I've always found that when we put our backs against the wall and venture into scenarios where it's essential that we get something done, we somehow always find a way. When we leave no plan B for ourselves, we are required to make plan A work. And so we do. It's a testament to both the resilience and power contained in the human spirit, as well as the reality that we can astound ourselves when we're unwilling to take no for an answer. That it's not the resources that are the problem. It's usually our unwillingness to move forward into the dark, our hesitance to try, explore, test, build, and rebuild. Actions that are surprisingly unrelated to one's best and have everything to do with with accepting nothing less than an identified outcome. One of the reasons I fell in love with the sport of running is because it reinforced this notion in my life. It became the template with which I could repeatedly amaze myself. I talk a lot about earning confidence, and oh, how I earned it. Step by step, mile by mile, day by day, in the sun, in the rain, in the desert, in the woods, through city streets, all over the country and the world, I came to understand the relationship between the turbulence of now and the satisfaction of later. It was on those days I'd push beyond my usual level of comfort, when that cloud of pain and agony would hover over me. I couldn't even really point to where my body hurt. It just all seemed to come together into this one giant hell, and to learn that I could not only endure that, but grow in those moments. To see myself rise above any preconceived notion or understanding of best in order to defeat my demons, conquer the day's objective, it changes the way you see yourself in the world. Now, could onlookers be tempted to call these self-created goals arbitrary, even unnecessary? Sure, and I get why they would, but I'd also completely disagree. Those days were a masterclass in doing what is necessary. Realizing that when you shut your rational brain off and don't give your mind a chance to talk your body out of it, you can see just how powerful you are. You realize that story of your best is nothing more than a house built on sand. Life is not about that story you've told yourself. It's not about your personal records and peak performances, what you think you can do or how far you think you might be able to go. It's about not stopping in the moments when it hurts. Doing what is required, a decision that compounds over time to create what was once impossible. One of my favorite quotes is by Admiral William McRaven, an absolute hero of mine. And funny enough, he says, if you want to change the world, you must be your very best in your darkest moments. And what a beautiful idea, to rise when life presents its periods of turbulence. And sure, it may be a matter of semantics, but in those moments of darkness, I think of your best, not in the traditional sense, not as a personal metric, but as a willingness to do what must be done, a removal of the spotlight from you altogether and instead pointed directly at the road ahead, at the task at hand. When you choose to make the journey not about what you can and cannot do, but instead make it about what must be done, the universe, as Paulo Coelho has so elegantly stated, conspires to make it happen. I think back to my journey, and at so many periods, my best wasn't good enough. I was so lost and so overwhelmed that the only thing I could do was not stop moving. That was my superpower, simply trudge through the fear of things falling apart, the nagging pride and hurting ego. And what I learned was that life is no different than all those miles I'd put in running. How I felt, or what my previous capabilities were, what I deemed my best to be, it was all noise, it was all irrelevant. What was required was that I move forward through the chaos and to something better, and so I did. And in your world, so can you. The stories we tell ourselves are so powerful, and in many ways valuable in our journey through life. But there's one narrative that eliminates the necessity of so many others. You can get to the top of whatever mountain you are seeking to climb so long as you do not stop. So long as you let go of the limitations tied to your quote-unquote best and instead do what is required to get there. you'll see how adaptable and transformative that best really is, how it's a lagging indicator. It will take time, but you're capable of being patient. And it will have its moments of chaos, but you are capable of weathering those storms. It will present obstacles that leave you unclear, uncertain, sometimes unprepared, but you're capable of picking your head up and moving through that haze. What you know of yourself now is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what you're capable of doing. And how far that goes will be determined not by putting a stake in the ground and calling it your personal best, but as Emerson has said, by hitching your wagon to a star and pulling yourself towards its light, a little bit at a time. The ability to find calm amidst chaos is a superpower. Finding clarity and focus. Not when the environment is perfect, not when the stars are aligned, but when your mind wants to wander and your emotions are high. When the conditions are not perfect and your brain starts to rationalize, maybe picking things back up some other time. Can you carve out serenity for yourself? Just enough to do what needs to be done, because sometimes that is what makes all the difference. I remember way back now, 2017, getting out of a relationship, relocating, starting over in many ways, just kind of wrecked. And for a period, couldn't immerse myself in my work like I used to. The rest of life felt like it was on such shaky ground that it's like, when everything's shaking, how do I find the stability to talk about it? To turn it all into something meaningful? It just felt impossible. But I was working through it, and one morning I was out on my patio listening to this meditation app. It was a guided meditation. And I'll never forget the voice saying, think of your thoughts as clouds floating overhead. You're sitting and looking up at them, just watching them go by. Which means a few things. One, it removes you from your thoughts. That chattering in your head is not you, and you can in fact step away from it and observe it. And two, it kind of diminishes the good thought versus bad thought label. They're all just thoughts. And they only mean something if you take them on, if you choose to embody them. And now this alone is a practice or skill that people work on their whole lives, right? This concept is just the beginning, but I felt that in many ways it was a light bulb moment. It opened a door for me. There was a very practical usage here. Because the easy days are rarely a problem, right? But life is messy. The easy days are great, but you can't rely on them, right? Life is ups and downs. It's the days that things are turbulent, or the other corners of my life are presenting issues, right? Whether it's people or health problems or frustration or anger at something that's occurred, just human things. To be able to sit down, open my laptop, and envision it all as little clouds floating overhead is freeing. It's like disassociating yourself from the baggage. Yeah, you might be in a storm, but you're capable of creating an eye wall, manufacturing serenity for yourself. It's saying, no, the externalities do not get to dictate how, when, and where I allocate my attention. It's not about running or hiding. This is about understanding that life does not create perfect moments. The timing will never be just right. And therefore, we must manufacture our starting points. We must create the very arenas in which we will perform. And one of my favorite examples of this was an eye-opening experience for me being sick on the day I planned to run a half marathon. Been practicing, working out for months, right? Woke up with this scratchy throat and a cough, and everything sort of devolved into chaos. I spent the morning constantly reminding myself that I was operating on an empty tank, that I was going to be less than 100%. It wasn't until I stopped talking to myself and just started running that I saw through the story I was telling. I separated my reality from my thoughts and created a space I could thrive in. I remember about halfway through looking at my time and realizing, wow, like not only am I okay, this is great, I feel good. I'm gonna make something incredible out of this. Right? Conditions weren't ideal, but that's just it. Sometimes life asks us to make something of ourselves and the world around us with less than ideal circumstances. When things aren't perfect, can you separate your thoughts from the task at hand? Can you find focus when you're surrounded by noise? Can you create clarity amidst the clutter? It's important to understand that life consists of highs and lows. That is the plane of reality we exist on, and so the question becomes, during the lows, can we carve out that environment to succeed? When we want to stop, to turn back, when we want to make excuses, can we separate the thoughts from what must be done, the emotion from the action? The ability to find calm amidst chaos is a superpower. We just need to remember to look. We need to remember that the negative emotions, the ideas, and the stories are not us. They are clouds floating overhead. Step back, observe them, let them go by, and understand that now it's time to do what needs to be done. Now it's time to tap into that potential and that strength that's always been there. It's always existed. It just needs permission, not from the external world, but from you now. If you have the ability to love yourself first. Charles Bukowski. So last week I was in Utah, and while I was there I did some guided breath work, which I'd never done before, and honestly was a little skeptical at first. But I try and keep an open mind and gave it a shot. I'm happy I did. It ended up potentially being one of the most important things I've ever done. And I want to share why. Because this breakthrough or aha moment, if you will, was exactly what I needed when I needed to hear it. So this episode's going to be a little different than usual, but I feel compelled to pass it along. So to set the scene, I arrived with a friend of mine to the instructor Jen's location. She gave us an overview, kind of explaining what the next hour is going to look like, and handed me a notebook to write down my goal for the session. And the notebook becomes pretty important as the story goes on. But I opened it and I wrote what I'd like to use this session to reflect on. It happened to be the walls that I have a tendency to build around myself, right? That day, that felt like the most pertinent obstacle in my life. I saw it as an opportunity to push back against that reality that human beings love to create normal and then latch onto it. And that's not ideal, because when we do that, we stop looking for places to grow, we stop pushing, we stop seeking to live life to the fullest. In other words, we settle. And so I wrote that down. I closed the notebook, laid back on this incredible fuzzy blanket, and the music got turned on. We began the breathing pattern. In, out, in, out. Jen started guiding us, verbally taking us back to a conversation with our younger selves. The journey had begun. And this is the part where things get really interesting, because my thoughts really did feel like some strange mix of dreaming and hallucinating, just from breath work. But at some point, she referenced the need to let go and said the words, we weren't meant to suffer or hold on to suffering. And that really cut deep, because I know there are so many places where I've rationalized continuous suffering in my life. I'd speculate that in some way, we all do. When the hard thing or the uncomfortable thing, when they stop being stepping stones and instead just become the way things are, becomes a concession. Hey, this doesn't feel good, but it's my life. This person holds me down, but it's how things are. I don't like doing this every day. It eats at me, but hey, life, am I right? That's learned helplessness. It hides in the corners and the nooks and crannies of life, subtle enough that we don't give it much thought. And I imagined very vividly climbing down a ladder placed on the edge of this dark canyon that went straight down. Down, down, down. Everything, my entire landscape was black and white. There was zero color, except for the rays of light barely visible at the bottom. All the way down as I descended into the canyon. The colors, they'd get a little stronger, a little brighter, as if every step put a little more vibrance into my life. Each move down made things a little clearer, the ladder becoming quicker and quicker, eventually turning into a slide that brought me down to the base of the canyon, where upon landing and standing up, everything was illuminated. Fields of sunflowers, waterfalls, birds chirping, the sun shining, and it was there in that moment I realized my intention for the class, the one I wrote down in that little notebook, well, it missed the mark. Not in the sense of being incorrect or wrong necessarily, but it simply wasn't enough. See, at the root of it all, or at the bottom of that canyon, existed life with the courage to love yourself. Not just accept yourself, not just be okay with your existence, but love yourself. With all your faults and your struggle, with all your mistakes and your history, it became clear to me how much changes when you love with all your heart the person staring back at you in the mirror. The opinions of others, they do not guide your decision-making. How could they? How could others know you better than you? In fact, those opinions are part of the black and white landscape to be left behind at the top of the mountain. The consistent suffering you've become accustomed to, the learned helplessness you endure, that's not acceptable to someone who truly loves him or herself. Loving yourself means pushing away that which is not you. It's finding that ladder down to the beautiful world of authenticity and truth, the magic of being aligned with what really matters. And what's funny is, I can talk about breaking down barriers. They should be broken down. I can talk about stepping into fear because it should be confronted. I can talk about finding a way out when we're stuck and a way up when we're down. I can talk about all of that every day of my life. But none of it matters if you don't learn to fully love the reflection in the mirror more than you ever thought you could. Think about the gift you could give to that younger version of yourself. Think about what you could give to those close to you, your family, your friends. Think about what you could do for the world if you left those black and white concessions behind you and lived a life true to yourself. It is, of course, not always easy, but I learned that day that it is the North Star. It's what we build upon. So before we ask how to shape the world around us, maybe we should be asking, how do we embrace the one within us? Maybe we should learn to love ourselves so deeply that those walls don't need to be broken down. Because in time, we'll learn not to build them up in the first place. We'll learn that in a world of black and white, it is acceptance and trust and confidence and love that gives it color. Les Brown has said, "You don't get what you want in life, you get who you are." If you put the man together, the world responds. You build yourself up, evolve, life around you will transform. Someone once asked me on a podcast episode about imposter syndrome, why I think it's actually a very positive thing. And my thinking is, imposter syndrome is a sign that you're in an arena somewhat foreign to you. You're trying something new, playing the student. Anytime you do that, of course you're going to feel out of place. You have to. You don't grow without putting yourself in an environment in which growth is possible. We have to shake up the old in order to create the new, and it's that process, to Les Brown's point, that makes us who we are. It creates our reality. Jim Rohn has said something similar in that it's not what we have, it's what we become. Having something is one thing, sure. But building yourself up to be someone who can repeatedly go out and get that thing over and over and over again, well, that's something different altogether. Are you willing to be that vulnerable? To start on the ground floor and work your way up? Because here's the deal. There have been many times where I knew I had to be more than I've ever been in order to obtain something I've never had. And if I aim to live life to the fullest, and I do, realizations like this will only continue. Everyone knows it's painful when there's a delta that exists between what you want and what you're currently capable of having or acquiring. That's a tough realization. And what epiphanies like that tend to do is leave you with a few options, right? You can run away or get better. You can surrender and find something lesser, or become worthy of that thing you want. Talk about a difficult conversation with yourself. Acknowledging that you're currently not where you need to be. The ego does not like that. It's uncomfortable. That's why so many people raise the white flag and run. It can be much easier to shake your fist at the world around you than it is to delve into the one within you. Joseph Campbell has said, the hero's journey is inside you. Throw off the veils and open the mystery of yourself. Close your eyes and imagine a world where you aren't scared to go after what you want. To grow along with your dreams, your goals, aspirations, where you walk directly into that space your curiosity is begging you to explore. Where you condition yourself to depersonalize the criticism and failure and instead focus on the becoming. That's not some crazy proposition. You're not being asked to go perform some miracle. It's simply about giving yourself permission to evolve into what you can become, allowing water to nourish the seed that is your soul. When you look around you and feel the very human thought that is, I wish something about this was different, I challenge you to be courageous enough to point in and ask, how can I make it so? How can I level up and become the type of person that has X, that gives Y, that experiences Z? You are capable of filling that gap. Again, not a negotiation with the world, but an agreement with yourself to accept more discomfort in your life in exchange for the upside that comes with it. There's something to the saying, don't wish it were different, wish you were better. Because again, it places power and control in your hands to evolve and make it reality. It's crazy to me how easy it is, and because of that, how many people complain about something their entire lives without owning the change. Becoming the person who lives differently, sees differently, feels differently, it's all there. You get in life who you are. And how incredible that who you are never ends, it's limitless. If you're willing to push, to grow and change, it is your ticket to the ride of a lifetime. I used to separate building up and tearing down as if they were two totally different ideas rather than one perpetual loop. See, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It simply transfers from one thing to another. We are renting everything in this world, grabbing little pieces of life as we run through it. And what we leave behind in the rear view has the potential to tug at our heartstrings as we see it collapse into the horizon, sure. But it also has to. Yesterday was, in its own way, the beginning, a nurturing parent preparing you for the world of today. Pushing you out the front door, and maybe you don't feel ready, we never do. But things have to go in order for more to arrive. The tearing down is the building up. I have a significant relationship with this idea, letting go. I think because it's personally been one of my greatest adversaries. And the words that escape our lips pull back the curtain on who we are. Humans are just projectors with eyes. As my words escape, the hope is something beautiful will be let in. As I'm sitting here, writing, speaking, I'm thinking about how exciting the prospect of scaling this message, growing this brand, helping more people, adding more value, while simultaneously dancing around the terror of relinquishing some level of creative control with my work. You can't, of course, grow and still do things how you did them in a one-bedroom apartment in 2014. This isn't new. I've been grappling with it in different contexts for years. It's so personal to me, but the reality is there's no gray space here. This situation is clear as glass. You have to let go in order to acquire acquire. You have to tear down those barriers in order to make room for more. This is and always has been a me conversation. A look at myself in the mirror conversation. Eddie, what are you willing to let go of, because there are ropes that must be cut? See, these conversations hurt, but they are the transfer mechanism to all that is beautiful. Being self-aware hurts. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that it hurts less than operating in a state of consistent delusion. So I offer this question to you. What was the last conversation you had with yourself? When was your last "is what I want and what I'm doing" aligned conversation? When was your last "am I holding on to too much" conversation? Your last "if I want parts of me to be reborn, am I willing to let the unnecessary things die" conversation? Life is a cycle, and we forget that. As we get comfortable, as we become accustomed to routine, it's easy to forget. Are we shedding the old or hiding within it? In Gary Keller's One Thing, he mentions how a domino can knock over another domino 50% larger. So if you were to start with a 2-inch domino and keep increasing the one next to it by 50%, the 23rd domino in the progression would be able to knock over the Eiffel Tower. The 31st would be as tall as Everest. The 57th domino would be able to bridge the gap between the Earth and the Moon. See, but it must be understood that it's the 50% growth from domino to domino that makes the difference. If each domino stays the same size, you don't get any remarkable transformation. And in many ways, that's what we do. We want the moon, but we stay that 2-inch domino. That's my example of holding on to perhaps too many aspects of the creative process. That holding on prevents the 50% jump. For you, the journey before you will be a different one with different characteristics. But the rule's the same. The old dominoes must fall in order to create something new. That energy must be passed on. And it is capable of transferring, this is the important part, to something much bigger than itself. That's why we allow the old to fall. It's not that it's valueless. It's that its value was in setting up the brilliance that now awaits. You can't be afraid to tear down the old, right? We have to seek out that fearlessness that exists within us. It's crippling our growth, diminishing our capacity to live life to the fullest. That's what's scary. Protecting that which no longer serves us is what's dangerous. So let yesterday fade into the rear view. It may hurt, it may tug at those heartstrings, but when you look back years from now, it will be the reason, the very reason, you'll have embarked upon the adventure of a lifetime. It's what you destroyed that will have opened the door for everything, brought forth the manifestation of the beautiful life you ultimately came to build. So you've made a decision. Congrats, you're 3% done. Now I'm paraphrasing, but that's an idea from author and entrepreneur Lee Benson. Belief and execution, the duo that will change your life. First, believe. Why? Because nothing happens without belief. Nothing begins without an understanding and a trust that the future contains something of value. That the seeds of discomfort being planted will bear fruit. We simply don't walk through doors if if we don't believe something of value exists on the other side. And then there's execution, the doing. Congrats, you gave yourself permission to begin. That was a big step, right? But now you have to deal with life, and life, my friends, is no picnic. It's in the doing that success is either obtained or not, that a new reality is birthed or not. In the book, Your Most Important Number, Lee Benson has said, so you've made a decision, congrats, you're 3% done. Why? Because, well, now comes the implementation, the execution. Now the feet are on the ground and the wheels, the road, and we must transform the thoughts into things. Thinking can be so much more convenient than doing. Execution is trying things. It's recognizing the attempts that didn't work. It's moving forward only to realize wrong path or wrong approach. Or maybe what's required of you is not yet something you're capable of producing, and so you must evolve. It's seeing setbacks as data points. It's understanding that to not know is okay because we collect our answers as we go. It's seeing the journey as an experiment, one in which we seek to understand ourselves and the world. There is so much contained in that 97%. It's a write your own ending storybook. An infinite number of paths and outcomes, but ultimately only discoverable by you. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about life. And once you give yourself permission to walk a certain path, once you believe in something greater than the world as it currently exists, you become an artist, painting something that was not there before, using the highs as little benchmarks to remind you why you started to begin with when your landscape becomes gray. It's using the lows as fuel that turns the ordinary into extraordinary, that slingshots the old you to the new you, adding brightness and vibrance to the overall scene. You're encapsulating all of it as you move through that great unknown, as you push further and further into the abyss. You're playing the role of maker, not because you knew how it would all turn out, but because you didn't, and still you executed. Recently in an interview, I heard Alex Hormozi, a now accomplished entrepreneur in his own right, talking about some of his failings, consulting gyms in the fitness industry, the moment when things went south. And he lost it all. Now, for a moment, he thought he had. Money, assets, and perhaps even the pride gone. But came to learn that money and those assets, they are lagging indicators. They aren't the value that's obtained. The value is who you become. The value is learning how to be someone who can obtain those things in the first place. It's emerging from the old restriction and limitation, the old narratives. Because that cannot be taken away. When we execute, we're making ourselves something we otherwise could never have become. And so Alex learned that what he lost was insignificant compared to what he gained. And why is this such a common theme? With industry leaders, folks speaking on their accomplishments, I think the answer is simple, because you don't get there without the doing and the execution. And if to execute means to step forward without having all the answers, after all, we are only human, life will humble us. Excellence must be a game of trial and error. We can't escape those lost everything stories. Because choosing the right path every time, well, that only happens when you choose no path at all. We have to act and be okay understanding that action brings with it mistakes and lessons and setbacks. You know, all those little annoying things that become greatness. 97% is left because the path before you is unwalked. But know that it contains everything you need. So believe it, decide, because nothing starts without that initial 3%. But nothing changes without the subsequent 97. That's where we are shaped. And when you come face to face with the inevitable adversity, know that life might take the material gains. It might demand a price you deem to be steep. It might collect as a toll assets you've been accumulating along the way. But it can't take what you know or who you've become. And that is why you execute. To build the world around you, yes, but most importantly, to build yourself into someone who can thrive in such an environment. It's in doing that the man is built. And as was said in Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, build the man and the world falls into place. One of my favorite anecdotes or mantras is work hard in silence, let success be your noise. That idea, in my mind, is perfection. Let your growth, your evolution, and yes, ultimately your accolades do the speaking for you. This always hit home for me for two reasons. One, because things of value come with a hefty price tag. We know this. Excellence requires sacrifice. It is, in many ways, both a daunting and worthwhile pursuit. And two, well, because we often conflate flailing around with progress. In fact, some of my favorite books, whether it be Deep Work by Cal Newport, Relentless by Tim Grover, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, part of what captivates me with these is the emphasis on what we are willing to do in silence, behind the scenes. That's where true meaning and value materializes. It's also where it's most difficult to commit and continue forward, because in silence, there is no audience clapping for you. There is no validation. When you're building and reading and improving, when you're at the gym or on those calls, establishing that foundation, putting in the hours, it's easy to look around and have doubts. Right? Our brains go, I did the work, where's the reward? I sacrificed, so where's the payout? It's not intuitive to understand that, hey, it's not visible yet. One of my favorite metaphors, the lily pad pond, in which there is a pond with lily pads doubling in size every day, and on day 30, the pond is completely covered with them. So what day was the pond half covered? And if we're thinking quickly, we might be inclined to say, well, half of 30 is 15, so it was half covered on day 15. But that's wrong, because if they're doubling every day, that pond wasn't half covered until day 29, and only a quarter covered on day 28. Meaning every day before then, the change was so small that perhaps it wasn't even visible to the naked eye. So small that to onlookers, the prospect of it one day being covered might have seemed far-fetched. But what was at work was the necessary change to set the stage, to start what would ultimately become the exponential growth that is noticeable, impactful. Now, of course, lily pads are not human, but little thought experiment, let's say they had been. I'd like to believe that talking about their growth, their plans, right, them screaming about how great they are and what they will someday be would not have helped them grow faster. In fact, it might have potentially even distracted the necessary evolution. The growth was not them versus the world, it was them versus them. And that's the idea, right? It's okay to work on you, to make a deal, sign a contract with yourself that you are doing something now that only you understand, that won't be visible until a later date. Let success be your noise, because there's often zero correlation between the loudest person and the one making the greatest impact. Let success be your noise, because you can't fake competency. Let success be your noise, because leaders don't need to proclaim they lead, and winners don't need to prove they've won, and virtuous people don't advertise their virtue. It's in the doing. That's where we pay the price, the steep price. I've always said the last 10 years for me, the hardest part wasn't failing. It was not when things didn't go as planned. The hardest part was simply not knowing. It was the whisper that, hey, all this could be for naught. That I'm wasting my time. That the whole idea is a car without wheels. And that's what hurt. But if I could go back in time, talk to my younger self, I would say, all this, all of it, the ups, downs, highs, lows, it's making you who you need to be. And if something doesn't work or go as you planned it originally, relax. You learn, you adjust, and you move forward. That's how the doubling of lily pads, right, using the same metaphor, occurs. You're learning, you're growing, and that's a you thing. I talked a few weeks ago now about the difference between a fee and a fine, as discussed in The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. The weight of not knowing, it isn't a fine, it's not a penalty, it's the fee. It's the cost to get into the show, the ticket to something greater. But you have to walk through that door. Again, it's a decision, it's personal, it's a commitment. It's nothing that screaming and seeking attention brings. You have to trust yourself, believe in yourself, right? Your effort is doubling in size. It's compounding exponentially, and you don't need to convince others. You need to stay consistent and build yourself up until the world has to notice. Trust the mission you're on. As long as you're, one, moving forward, and two, learning and adjusting, you are destined for something greater. By committing, you have stacked the deck. By believing in yourself, you have rigged the game. It's about hearing and believing that voice that says, there's more in store for those who take it. And you are capable of that. That's the decision that will ultimately ring so loud, it will echo through time. I was in the car recently with my sister Allie, her girlfriend Alex, and her girlfriend's dad, Jeremy. We were on our way to dinner in Naples, Florida, simultaneously driving and kind of looking through different places to eat. And no one really knew the area well, right? So we get to the point where we're pretty sure we have a spot we want to go picked out, when Alex suddenly looks up her phone and says to her dad, it looks like the place we're going tonight is a little fancy. And so for context, right, they're both from London. Their accents make this 1,000,000 times better And he hears her, he looks back over at her and says, well, we deserve fancy, don't we, darling? And I'm like, oh my God, you guys are a real life movie and don't even know it. I thought it was just such a beautiful thing. Moments like that are everything. Reminders to immerse ourselves in the moment, in what matters with the people that matter. This, of course, wasn't about the restaurant, but how evident it was that he was grateful to be there. I remember seeing a quote that said, if you can't find joy in a cup of coffee, you certainly won't find it in a yacht. So how's that for perspective? You know, it's the little things that hold the value, the ones that become the big things. And while our eyes are fixated on mountaintops, life is about the climb. Or as it's put in another anecdote, we live not for the destination, but for the journey. And see, this is a very timely topic for me. I woke up today having hit the milestone, 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, which has honestly been a goal of mine since I started doing this in 2014. I woke up so excited, so happy, so grateful for every single view, for every person that stumbled upon my message and saw somewhere in my journey a little piece of their own. But as today's gone on, it's been interesting. I found myself more and more unsure how I feel. Because on one hand, it is representative of that exact thing. The journey, the ride. I feel like the luckiest human alive, with friends and family that have truly carried me through the valleys of life. And if anything, milestones like these honor them and the light they bring to the world. But on the other hand, a part of me couldn't help thinking, oh, okay, I guess 1 million is next. And trust me, I wish that wasn't true, but it is. I remember reading in the Almanac of Naval Ravikant a passage where he said, essentially that the excitement of acquisition isn't in the thing we're acquiring, it's in the anticipation of it, the buildup. I believe he used the example of a Ferrari, implying that waiting for it was the fun. That's the rush. Getting it is just kind of, okay, now I have a Ferrari. And that's what makes these benchmarks we create so interesting. They're everything and nothing simultaneously. Reminders that finish lines aren't of value for their own sake. They're valuable because they remind you of the race you ran, the highs you cherished, and the lows you fought through. Life ebbs and it flows, and I'm continuously fascinated by its duality, by the overlap we need to live in, how two things can be true at once and so often are. I can sit here today and tell you, I think in a lot of ways, societally, we've gotten a little soft, too soft, that we often fail to understand that the road to what we want runs through the very landscape that will push us to be more than we've ever been. That we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Or that the beauty of being human is that we can make sacrifices now for that which we desire in the future. All this, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely unequivocally true. But there's also the existential question. Yeah, but for what? If you're not living, cherishing the little things, finding the miraculous in something as small as a cup of coffee, then when, darling, will you let yourself deserve fancy? Now, I'm not going to claim I have all the answers. I do not. But if my time on this planet is a test case, well, here's what it showed me. When life is all about the destination, the 500K milestones, the money, the growth, the status, the world becomes hollow, and man, does it hollow out fast. Things mean less. And while sure, they're often a valuable direction to point the compass, they are not life. And on the contrary, when it's all play and no direction, all wandering and no learning, all chaos and no building, that subsequent meaninglessness emerges again. It's in balancing the two. Life is incredible, but only to those who make a point to see it as so. And God, is that easy not to do? It blows my mind how easy it is to miss the things that are most important. That's what this day has taught me. The finish lines and 500,000 milestones, though few and far between, are a celebration. But they do not point to themselves. They point to the little things. They point to the people. They point to the times you were walking through hell and kept walking. They point to the sunrises, sunsets, and times you sat back and thought, wow, am I lucky? After all, there's a reason the view from the top points right back down to the world below. Shines a spotlight on the very ascent you just endured, as if highlighting what really matters, what life is really about. And so today, by default, a new ship has left the port towards a new horizon. Compass aimed at, let's say, 1 million. Why not? But it's essential to remember that that is the North Star that guides the journey. It is not everything. I challenge you to point your compass accordingly to whatever it is in your world that matters, that excites you, that lifts you up. And when you arrive, let it be not the goal in and of itself, but a celebration of the joy, the happiness contained along the way, the fact that you did look around and smile, did cherish those sunsets, sips of coffee, that you treated yourself to fancy, and that you paused every now and then to say to yourself, thank you. I remember running one day. This was years ago now. I lived a little bit further south, was jogging down the Hollywood Beach boardwalk. And that particular day happened to be a struggle. I think I just underestimated the heat and, felt beat up on my way back. But as I was passing all these people who were walking on the boardwalk, some going to the beach, some were going to get food, everyone was kind of doing their thing, I just remember thinking how funny it was that in that, that 1 second glance that happens between two people as they pass one another, that no one I was passing knew how awful I felt. And they'd never know. It felt odd to me that so much hurt could be hidden in plain sight. Not that in a million years I'd want them to know or they needed to know, but it's the idea that this bridge between their world and mine would never be crossed, that my little hell was a secret the Hollywood boardwalk would keep forever. In a way, it's kind of crazy to think about. How someone can be going through their own struggle and it's never apparent to passersby. Right? Think about that. The vast majority of chaos on planet Earth, it goes unseen. Everyone's just kind of carrying around their own invisible burdens. That Hollywood boardwalk probably keeps more secrets than I can comprehend. And I've talked about this before, how over time, one of my biggest mental shifts was detaching from this notion that everyone has it all figured out and I'm the one stumbling through. Everyone else jumps out of bed, excited, screaming, let's go world, let's do this, right? Well, I dealt with my unease and my concerns. And that's just wrong, right? Yeah, there's certainly variability in everyone's problems. We're not all the same. But everyone is climbing their own mountain. Everyone has their own cross to bear. I remember a quote from Viktor Frankl. He said, "To draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of a gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Thus, suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative." Eye-opening message. Relative and felt by all. See, there's two things I take from this. First, and probably the most obvious, I think it calls for us to be more compassionate to others, at least as much as we can. I've fallen short here plenty of times, we all do, but it reminds us that it should be a North Star. And two, there's a pragmatic element here, signifying that very rarely is what goes on around us about us. Very rarely is it personal. Because often our first instinct is to assign intentionality to things that happen around us. How could this happen to me? How could they do this to me? And in truth, it's just not about you. Again, the deepest, most complex aspects of human beings are invisible to everyone but the person they're happening to. Everyone is, to some extent, running down their own boardwalk on a hot summer day. So going back to that example, let's make up a scenario. Let's say I clumsily bumped into someone, ran too close to them. They could think jerk. They could think get in your lane. They could think pay attention, have some respect, I'm walking here. But would that situation be the product of my disrespect? Or would it be the fact that I'm exhausted, that I'm hot, that I'm dehydrated and only counting steps in my head? Buildings could have been collapsing around me and I would have had no idea. I'm focused on making it through. See, there's value in understanding this. So much value. The world is not working against you. It's comprised of 8 billion souls with different movies playing in their heads. And you can get more from it when you understand that. You can be more valuable when you understand that. You can give yourself more grace when you understand that. People cannot see your pain and you can't see theirs. But it is a shackle being removed to take life's events less personally, less seriously even. As you create something beautiful in your own world, understand that there are no true adversaries. I remember reading in the Four Agreements a while back, and this is kind of a sloppy paraphrasing, but people don't do things because of you. They do things because of themselves. And so, as you run your race, as you make your way into the world, understand that everything around you is assigned value by you. And those passers-by aren't for or against you. They are in the midst of various personal journeys, trying to run their own races, as are you. Look, the sun is hot. That humidity can be suffocating. The path laid out before you is long. These are tough obstacles that you have to overcome, that we all have to overcome. And in time you will. But don't create additional adversaries that do not exist. Don't imprison yourself with stories that don't hold up. It's not all about you. And understanding that, as it turns out, can be what makes all the difference. You can become so fixated on winning or losing the game that you forget to ask yourself, am I playing the right one? Is this my game? Am I setting myself up to win in an arena of significance to me? Because look, there are infinite games out there. And sometimes we find ourselves caught up in a race we have no business running. Meaning it doesn't really do anything for us. It's not where we want to be or should be. There's a saying by someone, and a few social media outlets actually restricted my post for suggesting it was Einstein. So it might not be Mr. Einstein, but whoever said it, thank you, you're awesome. The saying goes, everyone is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Now, there are a lot of us fish out there attempting to climb trees as we speak, wondering why we're not where we want to be. Perhaps seeing the results or lack thereof as an indication that we're insufficient, inadequate in some way. When, hey, that's not the case at all. It's that we haven't taken the time to identify our own personal intersection of what we love and what adds value to the world. We haven't manufactured those fireworks. That's something that has to be explored, found. J.R.R. Tolkien, not all who wander are lost, right? And I think we innately fear this process of searching because it's unsettling to not know how things are going to play out. Trust me, I've been there, right? It's taxing to not have your packaged little elevator speech and a 5-year vision when it seems like the whole world does. But to deprive yourself of this exploration is to potentially forfeit the very thing that you come to live for. Most of the time, purpose doesn't fall into one's lap. You have to have your eyes open. What's meaningful must be sought out. Now, I'm going to play a little devil's advocate here, because our world is not black and white. It sort of lives in this gray space, right? Can you win at someone else's game? Sure. There are a lot of people, quote unquote, succeeding in areas that are not ideal, that they don't love, that they're not their best in. But how is success being defined? I've talked extensively about my journey and all those games I used to play, the targets I used to aim for. And I know a lot of people who've come to similar epiphanies, right? But when you don't realize you can exit stage left and begin again, start something new, you simply continue this same song and dance, right? It's not life that keeps us confined, it's ignorance that keeps us confined. We simply have to be taught that there's more. And I understand to find an arena where you can thrive in a purely historical context is a luxury. And you are programmed to survive. You're not programmed to build an art studio because it's your passion, right? But there lies the battle. We are at a place in time where we have collectively cultivated abundance. The phone you're using to consume this content, that little thing can be a portal that transports your thoughts, your creation, your business to the masses. You have at your fingertips access to billions of people. You have reach that humans only 30 years ago, all the way back to the beginning of mankind, could only dream of. The means are there. In so many ways, it's about freeing yourself to pursue the opportunity that exists all around you, because we self-limit. Alan Watts asked the ever-important question, what would you do if money were no object? Now, in a practical world, why ask such a question? Simple, because removing those monetary constraints as you contemplate your answer allows you to truly analyze what endeavors are meaningful to you. When something is meaningful, you want to do it. When you want to do it, you immerse yourself in those little intricacies, in those details that the average person simply doesn't pay attention to. making you so good at whatever that thing is that eventually, not only can you be the best at it, but you can monetize it, and probably at a very high rate. It's not money holding you back. It's not time holding you back. It's not the external world holding you back. It's what you have been conditioned to believe that's holding you back. You are a genius at something. You are king or queen of your empire, victor within your arena. But to realize these things, you have to, 1, understand it's a possibility, and 2, refuse to stay stagnant. We have to stop conceding so much while simultaneously accepting so little. Life will never provide what you do not ask for. So why? Why be scared to ask? Life won't tell you you're a fish climbing a tree. You must tell you that. Life won't expand your horizons and adjust your trajectory. You must initiate that change. To find your genius, you must be willing to leave what's insufficient. To capture what's meaningful, you must be willing to leave what is meaningless. Let's agree to alter the question, do I have genius level talent? Because you do. And you live in a society that also rewards those who realize it. The question we need to be willing to ask is, are you willing to walk on shaky ground? To abandon, at least for a period of time, safety and the comfort of predictability in order to find that genius? Are you willing to nurture the greatness that already lives within you? Because it was never a matter of ability. It's a matter of what you're willing to discover. Thoreau said that most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. Probably an astute observation, as most death is potential put to rest. Most stories were stories about what could have been. Perhaps simply because it's easier on the ego to talk about what life could have looked like if you cared enough to shape it than to have actually put skin in the game and fallen short. But there lies the misconception. To step into life's chaos with the hopes of taming it is why we're here. And yeah, obviously it hurts to fail. It hurts to be vulnerable, to put yourself out there. Especially when it seems as though all eyes are on you. But that hurt is a fraction of the hurt Thoreau describes. Falling hurts, but it hurts less than wishing you had the courage to fall. Ridicule, it hurts. But it hurts less than being the one on the sidelines, pointing the finger and simultaneously longing for the courage to take action in their own life. What keeps us from going? What keeps us from building? We know life is short. We know regret is the ultimate pain. We know how much opportunity is out there, so why? Why would we not go? Why would we designate dreaming to sleep? In his famous Man in the Arena speech, Teddy Roosevelt said this: "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat." No one who is content in their own life will go out of their way to bring you down. There was never a critic deeply immersed in their own journey who took the time to mock or scoff at the man in the arena. I think our fear is pointed in the wrong direction. It shouldn't be concentrated on or focused on the opinions of those who have not yet themselves walked through those doors. No, the fear should be letting life go by without ourselves walking through. The fear should be contributing to Thoreau's statistic of quiet desperation, the one most men face. But you are not most men or most women, not because you were given some special power or status, but because you decided. You can choose not to be like most people. Basic math, taking into account the number of people in the stands versus the number of people on the stage or court or in the arena, well, it tells a tale of courage. Anyone can sit in the stands. Anyone can. Anyone can, from the nosebleeds, decide whether to clap or point or boo or cheer. But who suits up and enters the game? Who looks at the finitude of life and says, "This is my reason to start building, to put it all on the line. Because if I fail, it will mean I was one of the few who looked around and said, this isn't bigger than I am. This world is not predefined, it's being built in real time by those willing to walk through the doors and step into the arena. Not the critics, but the doers." And look, everyone has a thing, right? I don't know what that thing is for you, but you do. You probably think about it all the time, dream about it every day. You probably know it's where your heart is pulling you. Do not let your life become a statistic. Don't you dare go to that graveyard having been someone who held on tighter to excuses than to what mattered most in your life. So go. Step into the arena, and if they point, let them point. If they criticize, let them criticize. Your concern isn't with those wishing they had the courage to step through those doors themselves. It's not about them, it's about you. It's about understanding the beauty and the opportunity and the freedom contained in life for those who find the courage to reach out and take it. Deciding who you'd like to be most often starts with leaving the parts of you you no longer want to carry around. So reminisce. Think back. Examine. Because you didn't just arrive at today. This moment is the result of thousands upon thousands of steps and conversations and decisions. Our lives are sculpted like ocean shores, one wave, one gust of wind at a time. And sure, there were certainly events that expedited the process. But the point is, holistically, landscapes take time to materialize, as did this one. But you're not confined to this moment. In fact, you, in and of itself, is an idea. You is a story that incorporates the things you used to do, places you used to go, people you used to know. You is not right now. You is how you summarize the path that created right now. But you can change, because you will always mean what you decide it does. So reminisce, think back, examine, and feel the warmth of the good times. Bask in the moments that lit up your soul. But don't be afraid to pull back the curtain on those things that, well, maybe you aren't too proud of. The things that no longer defined you, perhaps never defined you to begin with. Because see, before we cut ties with those stories and send them out to sea, we must do the hard work of recognizing what they are. Before we can identify the life to be lived, we have to be able to see the one that will live no more. And so it's okay to walk down that road. Those things are no longer you. They are ideas, old ideas, bad ideas, and so they will be relegated to the sands of time. They played their part, as everything does, and now it's time to detach. So reminisce. Think back, examine, grab what you love and let it become your guiding light. Take hold of the meaningful and pour it into the new you, the one you're making now, the one that matters now. You'll need it. Because the old you, it'll try to reemerge. It'll present itself in the shape of old faces with old expectations. Old places connected to old habits, old stories that just don't want to end. But these characters, they played their part. And thank God they did, because now they're recognizable. Now you know to cut ties. You know, I wish it weren't so. I think we all do, but sometimes life requires that we touch that burning hot stove in order to understand that it's hot. It's easy to dismiss these occurrences as a bad thing or wasted time, but I think they're a beautiful thing. Recognizing and mitigating our mistake leaves us with a new foundation to build on, a blank canvas. It makes you not a prisoner to yesterday's work, it makes you an artist again, a designer, a creator. So reminisce, think back and examine, but not to hold on. Reminisce to let go, to say the goodbyes that will make space for the hellos, to free yourself of excess that will make space for the necessities. You've spent a long time designing you. Some of it ideal, but all of it valuable in its own unique way. The reality is that now, in this current moment, not all of it needs to come with you. So reminisce, think back, examine, so that before you move ahead, you know exactly what needs to be left behind. I've always been amazed at how much life can change with a small perspective shift. You hear something the right way, maybe even something you've heard, 1,000 times. This time you just hear it differently, and suddenly the light bulb goes off. Suddenly, it all makes sense. I was talking to one of my friends recently about how he threw discus in high school, and he was incredible at the sport, but for, a long stretch, he was inconsistent with his release. And coach after coach after coach would try and help him with it, but it wasn't until one said to him, "Hey, instead of sprinting to the release, think of it as a scissor motion." Right now, I don't know much about discus, but for whatever reason, that clicked for him. The gears started turning, he went to states, had the best performance of his life. All because he looked at the same situation through a different lens. He found clarity in what was around him. Now you might be thinking, what does that have to do with me? Well, I'm of the thinking that in our own lives, right, the battles we are all individually fighting, the struggles we are going through, amidst that storm, we are one little light bulb moment from the clarity we need to re-engage, to create momentum. We're never as far from what we need as we think. But what we do is we convolute things. We tell ourselves that, the change required is monumental. It's some larger-than-life transition. You look at my friend, the difference between a good season and an amazing season, it wasn't a year in the weight room away. No, it was a small mental shift. And even in your world, if the shift is just the beginning, great. Everything of substance does in fact have to start. And it's arriving at that point, giving yourself the gift of clarity in a pursuit that becomes critical. I've always visualized that epiphany as me sitting in a dark room, pitch black, which is intimidating, it's intense, feels, even helpless at times, but understanding there is always a light switch an arm's reach away. There's always the thing that will be transformative. We just have to keep reaching, keep stretching, keep feeling around for it because it exists. And with an outstretched arm, the very thing necessary to get us out of the dark and into the light is waiting. And that's just it. We can't conflate the goal with the delta between where we stand now and the goal. No one can run a marathon in one giant step. It doesn't matter how strong you are, you're not leaping the course and diving through the finish tape. No, you're running thousands and thousands of little manageable steps. But we come face to face with situations in life where we know the finish line, whatever it is in your particular case, is way out there in the distance. And it's overwhelming, it's intimidating, it places us back in that dark room where we're surrounded by the unknown and inundated with stories we tell ourselves about how difficult life is. This is where you need to reach out and look for the light switch. It's where you need to remember you're not responsible for the finish line, because how could you be? Humans are only capable of moving forward one step at a time. It's where you have to understand that the greatest impact on the discus right now is a change to your release point, a perspective shift, something minimal, that gets you the distance. Every time I've been stuck or lost, it has been an adjustment to the way I'm looking at the world around me that's ultimately made the difference. A little reminder to take the pressure off. At least in the sense that we can only control what we can control. And usually that's the step right in front of us. So my suggestion is to stop looking up at the mountain and look down at the very next step. Because from where you stand, there is a path to get you there. But the process calls for you to, 1, believe it's possible, and 2, make the little adjustment in real time that will put you in position to do just that. You're never down and out. Not so long as there's air in your lungs and blood pumping through your veins. You are, rather, one decision away, one epiphany away, one flick of the light switch away from recapturing momentum and finding yourself again. You don't have to be perfect. You have to persevere. And they are wildly different. One is a limiting belief that because things are not exactly how you'd like them to be, you've lost. And the other says, look, things will never be exactly how you'd like them to be. So buckle up and make art of the chaos. There's something to the notion that the last one standing gets the prize. Why? Well, because when life presented obstacles, he became a capable navigator. When life became convoluted, she learned to break complex things down into manageable things. When life indicated that his work wasn't enough, he learned not to take it personally, but rather to evolve. The rest of them, though, the rest of them went home, disappointed that they didn't meet some standard of perfection. Look, you don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be in motion. You do have to be going. It's amazing what we find when our feet are moving. It's incredible what we think of when presented with new stimuli. As if the castle doors have been opened, inviting in the little pieces of life that will be made into new stories and transformed into new possibilities. Imperfect brilliance. So how does one win? Well, he scoffs at the idea of perfection and stumbles instead into meaning. It's Tolkien, not all who wander are lost. Life is an experiment, and my friends, experiments cannot be perfect. So who wins the game of life? Perhaps it's the one who can find out what not to do the fastest. See, to persevere is to stand, to move forward, to see your current ignorance as currency that will be used to acquire knowledge. As the saying goes, sometimes life is merely about hanging on when others would be letting go. No, not living in a flawless world. No, performing no miracles, but fighting, scrapping, holding on, being willing to fail spectacularly and get back up. Those are the occurrences the stories worth remembering. So why is life a courage game? It's a courage game because getting what you've never had means doing what you've never done. And doing what you've never done, well, cue the circus music. It isn't always beautiful. At least not until we're able to look back. And when that time comes, and you smile and reflect on the journey, the change you've created, I guarantee it won't be because you minimized the bumps and the bruises along the way. It won't be because you were afraid to scrape your knees. It will be because in a world of no, you said yes. In a world where people are afraid to feel flawed, to appear ignorant or unsure, you stepped into the chaos and made something out of it. Door number 1, perfection. The door of no mistakes, of minimal criticism, but minimal growth. Door number 2, the door of perseverance, the door of humility, vulnerability. Yeah, chaos, but also upside. And so the question remains, which one will you walk through? Which step is going to mark the beginning of the rest of your life? Find something to make yours. I connect every few months with some of my good friends to strategize, kind of reflect back on the previous quarter, plan for the new one with each of our businesses, kind of share ideas, stuff like that. And I was chatting with my friend Keith about life before he found success in what he's doing now, the struggle and the turbulence he faced, as well as ultimately his decision, and that's entirely what it was, to turn things around. And I've talked about his backstory before, so I'm not going to get too much into it, but essentially he grew up in a very negative environment, dealt with a ton of adversity, but got through it. Started his own national business, installing and repairing commercial pizza ovens, and the guy's just crushing it. And, you know, our conversation in that moment wasn't so much about the doing, it was more on the overcoming and how mentally we had to recreate ourselves to have any chance of moving beyond what we knew. I've talked about it a little before. Kids are simply not taught in school how to thrive, how to build, how to ask more of themselves in the world. They're taught to follow instructions, to do what they need to do in order to pass the exam, to progress to the next level. And there's a gray area, because I'm not saying this is totally valueless, but I am saying that anything beyond that requires a reworking of sorts. Now, you ask anyone who stepped out of that cycle, and they'll tell you the mental and psychological shift that needed to take place was almost overwhelming, right? It's a lot, but it's imperative. I recently looked up the word entrepreneurship, and this is the definition. The activity of setting up a business or businesses, taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. And in my mind, it is the risk precisely that's challenging, that brings us so much pain, but also contains within it the reward. It's one of the craziest dilemmas we face. You know, you'll have to endure some of the worst times of your life, but because of that, you'll get to experience highs that would otherwise have been almost completely improbable. We have to rework the thinking that says discomfort equals run away. It's like, no, discomfort equals the price of something better. And sure, it's by no means mandatory, but it's where the upside lives. You have to train yourself to step out into the chaos with the expectation of taming it. And yeah, everything could go wrong, but also everything could go right. And just imagine what that would look like. That possibility alone validates the risk. We just need to convince ourselves. And that risk, by the way, is not just financial. In fact, most of the time it's not. It takes a variety of shapes in our lives. You run the race, you risk losing. You go up and talk to the girl, you risk rejection. You pick up and move somewhere new, you risk winding up somewhere you don't want to be. And maybe temporarily things do fall apart, but maybe you win the race. Maybe you find the love of your life. Maybe you relocate to the happiest place you've ever called home. Calculated risk is the beginning of everything that matters. And so back to the convo. We were talking about the different risks we've taken, how some chapters were fun, some were challenging, and some were both. And how, for me, there was even, from time to time, a conversation where I was asking myself whether it was really worth it. You know, when you're uncomfortable, the mind wants to do one thing: get rid of the discomfort. And I had to convince myself, remind myself that I'm someone who risks good to pursue great. Risk hurts. And somewhere in that conversation was when Keith said he remembers the exact point the risk became worth it. The discomfort became easier to manage. We're so used to taking orders, to playing scared, that the incentive just wasn't there until, Keith's words, it became mine. The most invigorating thing he ever did was find a pursuit to call his own. That's powerful. His business injected him with a new energy and, in essence, a new life, because he suddenly had a stake in the game. And I think that's what so many of us in so many areas are missing. The risk appears bigger when it's not counterbalanced by something meaningful. So find something to make yours. The simplicity there is beautiful. Complex ideas expressed in simple ways are always worth holding on to, right? We are programmed to lose because we are programmed to live according to someone else's standard, to think small, to ask ourselves, how do we not screw up? But when you can step outside that little self-imposed circle and instead ask yourself, what's something I can create that is my own, something I care about, that I can nurture, invest a part of me into, that's when life really starts paying dividends. You're not existing, you're living. Or as I've recently discussed, you're empowering yourself to not just sit in the room, but be in the room fully. I use entrepreneurship as the model for this discussion because that's been such a huge part of my life, where I've been injecting my time and attention and, risk. But the point is not that everyone needs to stop what they're doing and become an entrepreneur. That's one path of many, obviously. The point is that there is a risk-reward dynamic in entrepreneurship that we should all understand, extract, and inject into our own lives where it best applies. We've learned to settle in so many ways that we must know there is tremendous value in asking, what is it in my life I want to invest in? Make mine. Give myself the opportunity to experience the excitement of defining the things I care about and watching them grow. Right? Whether your current arena is entrepreneurship or motherhood, fatherhood, academics, a particular relationship, some combination of these, or anything else, to make magic out of the mundane requires we first make it ours. We take ownership, responsibility for the journey. We accept the risk and chase down the rewards. You can do amazing things when you realize what you're capable of and commit to its manifestation. So in a world where, yes, we are conditioned to fail, step out from those subtle shackles of learned helplessness. You are anything but helpless. It's just that you've yet to reach out and pull your dreams into your orbit. You've yet to put a stake in the ground and say, this matters and it's time to see it through. Because once you do that, the good stuff begins. This weekend, I needed to shut off for a little bit. So I got some Chipotle. Yep, big night. Picked a random episode of Game of Thrones, sat on my couch, and I put my feet up. Apparently, though, the universe had other plans for me, because I swear I was a few minutes in and I heard one of the most incredible quotes I've ever heard, which sent me in 400 directions thinking about how to share it and delve into it with you guys on the podcast. So, hey, sometimes you plan to sit there and watch make-believe armies fight, and you end up instead putting together an essay. Life in the big city, right? But the scene I'm talking about, there's a character named Sansa Stark, for anyone who hasn't seen it. And at this point in the show, she's lost her family, been away from home, essentially on the run for a long time, and was sitting by herself, kind of sulking, reminiscing, building a little replica of her old home in the snow that was on the ground as she sat there. And basically, just to set the scene, this little kid comes up, stomps on it. Sansa gets mad, hits the kid. She's just devastated by everything, exhausted by it all. And roughly that time, a second character walks up, a guy named Peter Baelish. And Sansa, standing up over her broken snow castle, says, "I was trying to remember what everything looked like. I'll never see it again." To which Peter replies, "A lot can happen between now and never. If you want to build a better home, first you must demolish the old one." He's implying that Sansa might think she wants to go home, but home is essentially gone. That place she knew, that place she wants to go back to, it's destroyed. The people she loved are no longer there. She thinks she wants to go back to that place because she's lost and scared and alone, and the human condition is always to return to the comfort of what we left, to recapture that feeling of clarity. But to truly find herself, what she needs to do is destroy that version of home and build a new one. To start again, to become something worthy of a new home, one that's more conducive to life now. Which is her character arc for the rest of the show, right? Slowly evolving into that person. See, life is this interesting cycle of dying and being born again, of leaving old things behind in order to build a new. The old you can only give what the old you always gave. So when life demands more of us, we have a real problem on our hands. What you knew is now insufficient. It's not enough. Sure, it was enough yesterday, but today's a different story. And we're always put in this situation, where the road before us is asking more of us than we've ever given. It demands more than we know how to accommodate. This is when it becomes very easy to misdiagnose home. To think the answer is behind us, what we need is buried beneath what was. When in reality, what was is no longer sufficient. What we really need is to set the past ablaze in order to create space for what must be brought to life. Home is an evolution, a cycle. As our world changes, we evolve right along with it. As old beliefs fall, new ones are built. As the old way is lost, a new way is found. By clinging to old, you sentence yourself to the never Sansa was so adamant about, at the expense of the infinite abundance and opportunity that's out there. It's worth noting that the phoenix does not descend from the clear blue sky. He rises from the ashes. It's after the old world falls that the new one emerges. I'm not the same person I was in 2014 when I left what I was doing to do what I'm doing now. That version of me died. And then again, when I packed up my things and relocated my life and business to South Florida. And then again, when I changed how I positioned myself, how I thought of myself in the world, and again, and a multitude of times since then. This current version of myself is dying as we speak, making room for the new. Every time I find myself at a transition point, it's pain. It's unlearning things I knew to be true, I was sure of. It's taking a sledgehammer to the old realities so that new ones can take their place. So that's saying a lot can happen between now and never. Yeah, anything can exist between now and never. The world is limitless between now and never, if you understand what never means. Because the old you could never have the things, meet the people, go the places, or become the person that you will be someday. The old you could never see the world the way you do or the way that you will. But the old you was never supposed to. What we once called home, our past, our understandings of life, they were critical. They set the stage for now. They brought us this strange intersection of who we once were and who we now need ourselves to be. It's not that crawling on the ground was wrong. It's that we are now required to grow our wings, to set ablaze the previous parameters so that new rules can be written. Change hurts, but it hurts far less than carrying the old you into eternity, while infinite possibility is left on the shelf. It hurts far less than equating your life now to what's been taken away or lost. Rise from the ashes of what was. Life will ask you to be better, more capable. It will ask you for more. Meet its call. Over and over again, meet its call. For anyone willing to let go of the old and give life to the new, a lot can happen between now and never. The world reflects back at us what we currently are, like a giant mirror projecting the movie that's playing in our heads. We lay on the horn in traffic, not when we're at peace with ourselves, but when we're in duress. We gravitate towards the negative, not when we're living in abundance, but when we're living in scarcity. We quit, retreat, contract, not when we're confident in the road ahead, but when we're doubtful, alarmed. In other words, we find out in the world what already lives within us. Life, in many ways, is not absolute, it's evidence. It's evidence that we'll use to justify the things we already believe. Wayne Dyer used to use the metaphor of an orange. It can be squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, but there will never be grapefruit juice pouring out of an orange. No, grapefruit juice doesn't live there. You can only find on the outside what lives in the inside. You can only extract from the orange juice. Recently, a good friend of mine said to me that they'd like to change their financial situation. To which my response was, perfect. You most certainly can, right? Like anything, yeah, it'll take work and some planning and some restructuring, all that good stuff, but you most definitely can. And his response was, sure, that's what all you motivational people say. Okay, smart guy. Now you're an example on a podcast episode. Congrats. Why? Because you want the people around you to realize how much is possible for themselves, right? It's not sorcery or witchcraft to believe something better is possible. In fact, if one doesn't believe it's possible, they're effectively cementing their feet to the ground, at least with regard to that particular pursuit. Let's face it, you don't begin journeys that are not possible. We don't allow ourselves to do that. And so, To not believe in an outcome and somehow still wish for that outcome, well, that's essentially our orange metaphor, right? Can't squeeze financial freedom out of a mindset that only sees monetary constraint. Believing it's possible starts the journey. See, there's so much pragmatism in growth. People talk a lot about the law of attraction, and yeah, I get it, right? It sets targets. But the picture of, let's say, a dream house on your wall is not why you'll eventually have the dream house. The picture of the dream house on the wall reminds you. It helps you believe that you're someone capable of someday acquiring that house, obtaining that type of success, which results in you, wait for it, doing things that help bring that to life. It is the doing. But that doing must be connected to belief. Mid-20s. I was unhappy, wanted more, but didn't really believe myself capable of obtaining more, right? That was the issue. Back to the old orange expecting grapefruit juice. Can't get results in an area not conducive to their creation, right? It wasn't until I said, you know what, maybe, not definitely, but maybe it could happen. Maybe I can take control here. The odds have to be greater than 0%, right? It's Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, it's like starting out, that's all you need, a chance, the door cracked. In the beginning, I just needed to convince myself something different was possible. The beginning of transformation and that internal change prompted how I interacted with the external world. You do things differently when you believe differently. Or, if you want to phrase it another way, believing that you can bring something to life doesn't guarantee that you actually do. But believing you can't guarantees that you won't. And why not stack the odds in your favor? I often juggle back and forth between the philosophical and the tangible or the tactical, right? 3 ways to do X. Life hack to change Y. Yeah, of course. Life does in so many ways come down to the tactics, to the how, to the steps. But does that even matter if you don't believe in the pursuit? Does it matter what Google Maps says if you never step out your front door? You have to convince you. You have to create an environment in your world where change isn't crazy, more isn't absurd. It might be challenging, but it's possible. And possible is enough. It is enough to begin, enough to step out, enough to see the trivialities as tools and the resistance as part of a beautiful game. Remember that the world is a mirror, reflecting back at us our worldview. We find what we look for, so give yourself permission to look for things that make life beautiful. Give yourself the gift of believing change is possible. I put on my shoes, stepped outside, and as I made my way down the street for my midday run, I felt the wind at my back, tailwind. My first thought, well, nice, this is convenient. Especially running along the beach where it can be pretty windy. It's definitely a luxury to have wind at your back. Sure enough, my mind went, oh, but that leaves me a headwind when I turn around and come back up the coast. My mind started to wander. I started imagining what it was going to be like turning around at that 6.6 mile mark. I was doing a half marathon that day and knew that, the way back would require that I level up. And every once in a while, the thought popped into my head, sort of reminding me of the inevitable. And sure enough, the moment arrived. The sun pressing down onto my skin, the humidity wrapped around me like a blanket. I hit 6.6 miles, turned around on A1A, and there was that headwind. But the first thing I noticed was not the force pushing back against me. No, in that moment, I felt the breeze, the coolness. It was refreshing. And there, underneath it all, was my light bulb moment. What we are presented with day in and day out is a question. It's a choice. Would the wind become my adversary? Something that, pushed me forward on the way down, but then held me back on the way up? Or would it be what pushed me forward on the way down and then cooled me off as I made my way up? And if you think that mental alteration or perspective shift is just nuance or too small to matter, I suggest you give it a go when you're doing whatever your equivalent of total exertion is. Whatever your mental stressor is that pushes you beyond your state of usual comfort. When you're in the middle of, let's call it, hurt, whether it be physical activity or a personal situation entirely unrelated to athletics, how are you internalizing the world around you? It's become clear to me over time that winning during our most trying moments comes down to mental shifts so small that they seem almost laughable in normal conditions. But your mind will always stop you before life will. So why not put yourself in a position to win? Everything around you is trying to help you in some capacity. Allow that to be the case. Remember that what you look for, you'll find. So if you look for resistance and obstacles and adversaries, they'll be everywhere. But if you look for and seek out value, you'll see that you are surrounded by nothing but value. Even those metaphorical headwinds become hands reaching out, working to cool you off as you make your way to greater things. So understand that when they arise, those headwinds, the ones that typically hold you back, they hide within them small wins. Small wins that will be the difference. The deeper one descends into chaos, the more important it is to find those victories, the ones hidden in plain view, the ones that look to many like problems. But you'll know. You'll know just how malleable this world around us is. The world seems to provide not definitives, but tools. So which will you pick up? What will you build with them? See, life is never happening to you. It's happening for you. So keep your eyes open, keep your feet moving, and remember that you will win, not despite the headwinds of life, but because of them. Because you've trained yourself when those around you see can't and won't, to find a way, to pull from the chaos the very thing you need most. Life gives you the canvas, but you are the one who must paint. Time waits for no one. Look, the earth will continue to spin, the sun to set, clocks to tick. There are no perfect moments, only moments, waiting to be interpreted by those passing through them. And as a raindrop in this thunderstorm, an actor in this play, the only rational question in my mind is, if time will not wait, why should I? If time will continue its steady march, why let it leave me behind? I'm in my mid-30s. And here's what I've already seen. I've already seen songs I grew up with, referred to as classic rock. I've seen some of my childhood sports heroes struggle to throw a first pitch before a baseball game. I've seen a substantial portion of my social interaction become digitized. I've seen once forever people in my life fade away and become memories. I've audibly laughed at the ridiculousness of things that at one point I was sure were important. I've redefined the meaning of the word home in my life more times than I can count. In fact, the way I see the world and the way I see myself operating, and it continues to change. As the saying goes, the only constant in our lives is that things change, evolve. Why does this matter so much to me? Well, because when I look back, the single thing that would consistently keep me from truly pushing that pedal to the floor, to truly capturing all life has to offer, was a fear, a very specific fear, the fear of losing what I had at that moment. I was scared to death of loss, as we all tend to be to varying extents. In fact, we're biologically wired to respect the fear of loss to a greater extent than the prospect of acquisition. There's humor in all this, though, a deeply rooted irony. It emerges when we discover that we lose everything. It all goes. The song that's playing ends for each and every one of us. And is this a sad thing? No. No more than the credits to your favorite movie rolling after the final scene. It was the show, the experience that meant the world. It's a beautiful thing if you let it manifest in all its beauty. If you move along with it, immerse yourself in its brilliance. My point is that the only way to lose is to wait. It's to not realize that you're starring in your own cinematic masterpiece, and those credits will at some point roll. It's to sit in a chair on the side of the gym while the rest of the room dances. Life is finite, and the power is not in a flawless existence. It's in understanding to our core that there is nothing to lose, that the window is small, that we should carry out the human equivalent of a fireworks show. We should be obnoxiously bold, absurdly courageous. We should go, live, try, experiment, explore, build, create. And yeah, sometimes you'll fail. And sometimes you'll fail spectacularly. But sometimes you'll triumph. And along the way, the mistakes, they become wisdom. They become courage. Both of which are integral to any meaningful grand finale. And as I make my way around the sun for the 36th time, the priority is to remember that these rides are not forever. They are precious. And that I have the strength to live accordingly. Fearlessly, courageously. My hope is that you find it within yourself to do the same. To pull back the curtains and see now that failure was never the adversary. No, not even close. The adversary is an unwillingness to make the most of your moments. The adversary is freezing amidst the constant hammering away of ticking clocks. The adversary is the prospect of removing failure's mask years down the road. only to stare directly into the eyes of regret. These outcomes constitute your greatest adversary. So for the sake of all that is meaningful, go push into the questions and the risk and the curiosity that makes life worth living. After all, it is not about failure. It's about time. Quite some time has gone by since the last letter I wrote to my younger self. A few years, actually. And I think we're due. Because older me continues to learn to both enjoy and be humbled by life. To experience hellos and endure goodbyes. To win and to lose, to acquire and to cut away. The world is a maze of complexity to navigate. And maybe we should start right there. Because look, kid, there are some fundamental ideas about life that you just have wrong. There is no door that you walk through where you suddenly go from not understanding to finally having all the answers. Part of growing up is realizing how little human beings know about anything. And that's okay. What you'll understand is it's not a reason to run, it's a source of courage to draw from. Oh, but adults are wise, you might think. No, adults are just children with mortgages. You'll learn that, and as we all become renters, even that's changing, right? Oh, but him over there, or her, wait, them, they have it all figured out. No, they just walk with conviction into their individual unknowns. That's all. Oh, but there has to be some certainty. We have to know some things for sure, you might think. Well, certainly we do, or at least we think we do, but you have to understand, 150 years ago, science said bleeding someone out would cure them of their illness, right? Our pursuit of truth is crucial, but it's a work in progress. Life is a work in progress. You are a work in progress. So what am I talking about? Why does this matter? Because I don't want you to think that you are ill-prepared to venture further into your potential. I don't want you to think that other people have what you don't, that you're not enough. The world around you is chaos. It's a mess. It's clay. Some people use it to build and create and shape their reality, and others, well, others don't. The kicker here is that nothing is built if you don't first give yourself permission to take the unknowns and make something with them. Once you understand that there is no secret code that must be figured out, you free yourself to explore and capture the essence of being alive. Again, life is messy. So go flail around. Wander. Go get lost. Who cares? You see what I'm saying? You can watch from afar, succumbing to the illusion that the world is some meticulously constructed orchestra where everything's playing in unison. Or you can dive in and make your own music, dance to your own melodies, because there is no perfect. There are people who stand still and people who pick up the pieces as they go. Next, and very closely related, younger me, give yourself a chance. Try things. No, more things, bigger things, terrifying things. You see those posters of people you have hung up on your wall? They're not of a different world. They're people like you. Right? But they decided along the way that they would try. That they would step out of line, break some rules, push life, and see how hard life pushed back. Younger me, on my college essay, I referenced one of my favorite quotes. I attributed it to Mark Twain. Turns out it wasn't even by him, but hey, life goes on, right? It said, 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than the ones you did do. So throw off the bow lines. Sail away from the safe harbor. Catch the trade winds in your sails. Explore, dream, discover. It's a beautiful quote. And here's what I gather from it. The biggest mistakes I've made over the course of my lifetime ended up being my greatest teachers, leading me to something new, to where I most needed to be. I mean, a lot of my mistakes are even funny stories, right, that I joke about with buddies over a beer. The vast majority of things you're worried about, they either won't happen or they're reversible. But what gets you, younger me, what truly hurts, is wishing you had the courage to apply to that thing that you instead let the deadline slip away. Or talk to that person you walked right by, or audition, or train, or travel, or follow your intuition, your heart to someplace new. Those are the things we tend to carry around. The second you learn that not going is far scarier than stepping out into the unknown, you'll possess a perspective that's incredibly valuable. It will change your life. And lastly, this one's kind of hard to articulate, but let me tell you, it continues to resurface. Here it is. If your intuition is telling you something, listen. Trust it. If something feels wrong, let it go. If it feels like it's where you need to be, you're being pulled in that direction, explore, move towards it. When you know in 30 seconds that someone isn't a good person, don't give them your time. When something doesn't align with your goals or objectives, don't feel bad walking away. When something excites you, trust that feeling. This is all intuition, and I've come to find that initial response to be more and more valuable. What that feeling is telling you matters. Don't turn your back on that. Now, of course, there's a line we have to walk, or an element of pragmatism we have to hold on to. Sometimes, when we're particularly upset, it makes sense to let the emotion subside and allow rationality to enter. But this is more about being aware of who you are and what you want, right? Don't talk yourself out of what you know you want and into what you know you don't. Life gives clues. It's not always 4D chess. Sometimes it can be simple. What's needed is right there. But you have to look around. You have to listen and trust yourself, and no one will ever know you better than you. But if you tune yourself out, then how can you have a shot at living a meaningful life? One on your own terms be impossible. So younger me, trust yourself. Beyond what anyone else tells you is best or most beneficial, again, those are answers only you know. So listen to you. One of my favorite messages is that you are your own experiment. That as we move forward into the haze of the unknown, we understand that at times we'll fall. At times we'll see our plans disintegrate right in front of us. But this is, when we step back and really examine, not a cause for alarm, but a chance to celebrate. Celebrate because the world pushing back at you implies that you are moving forward. And that is strength. As the saying goes, in the broken places, the light shines through. Younger me, promise me you won't be scared of breaking, that you won't fear leaving the harbor. Because nothing out there is bigger than you, or too much for you to handle or navigate. The funny thing is, younger me, that your journey is reliant on you giving yourself permission to go, to see, to explore. All that starts with you greenlighting your own adventure. But remember what I'm telling you. There is no rubric for life, it's trial and error. Remember that if you don't give yourself a chance, you simply watch the opportunity slip by. And remember that you are the only one who knows what's best for you. So trust that intuition. The world will be whatever you choose to make it. And my hope is that you realize you are strong enough. You're bold enough, you're capable enough to make it whatever that might be. So younger me, go pave your path. Go blaze your trail. And remember along the way, as you navigate the ups and downs, highs and lows, remember to look up and enjoy the ride. Just one more day. The power is in just one more day. Don't need to have the whole book written, stories told, or city built. It's not about one universal solution to all your problems. It's about continuing forward until the breakthrough. It's about knowing that when it feels most hopeless to go on, that's precisely when it's most important to do so. The world is not asking of you everything, just something. So give it something. Keep yourself in the game. Keep your head up and your eyes open. Keep your feet moving, even if you don't know where they may be leading you. You need not a billion answers, but one breakthrough. One breakthrough. See, we all fall. We all lose our footing. Life can be tough. And being that this is par for the course, the contract we signed before we breathed our first breath of air, it's a fool's errand to exhaust energy on the occurrence, to be angry at the situation, to feel bad about yourself for wandering there. No, it's about recognizing where you are and then finding it within yourself to step away. 1 foot closer to the breakthrough, to recapturing what matters. When things become too big, we simply shut down. Complexity is crippling. But truth be told, the path is not complex. Our manufactured interpretation is what's complex. So simplify. Step forward one more time, a little bit closer to the breakthrough. A little bit nearer to the light at the end of that tunnel. Remember, there is no all-encompassing formula. What there is the strength that emerges from one's willingness to inch forward. When all seems dark, when temporarily you've forgotten what that sense of excitement feels like, when the thrill of progress seems foreign, shut off the mind. This isn't the time to weigh pros versus cons or this versus that. Move into the haze, trusting that what you need will reveal itself. Because as long as you don't stop, it most certainly will. You'll find yourself again, your path again, things will make sense again. But that right is earned now. When we're tired, worn, in our solitude, beaten down, we might not be able to see it in the moment, but that's when the beautiful things are made. So trust that you are the designer you've been looking for all along. There are a handful of recorded lectures online by Jim Rohn, who has definitely become one of my favorite thinkers over the years. And I found this little nugget the other day that I wanted to share. He says, there are 4 emotions that will change your life: disgust, decision, desire, and resolve. And I want to talk about the first one because I found the story to be incredibly powerful and also relatable, right, in various aspects of life over the years. So he frames it by talking about a Girl Scout walking up to his front door to try and sell him some Girl Scout cookies when he's 25 years old. And he's broke, doesn't have any money at the time, and tells her what I assume to be a white lie as to why he can't buy the cookies at that particular time. Right, so he tells her that he can't. She walks away. He says after he closes the door and goes back inside, he felt something that completely changed his life. Disgust. An overwhelming feeling that he simply didn't want to live like that anymore. He didn't want to lie. He didn't want to be broke. And I'm quoting him. He says, the day you can say I've had it may not be the day it ends, but the day it begins. And that feeling, which of course on the surface seems like a terrible thing, right? No one wants to feel disgust with their circumstance. But it's ultimately one of the most powerful indicators life can present to us. There has always been, and I assume will continue to be, that point in many different facets of my life where I say enough is enough. I just never thought to categorize it and label it like he did, but that's what it is. You know, getting to a point where you look around and realize you've conceded too much. You've strayed too far beyond what matters to you. You've left too much on the table. That feeling, again, while uncomfortable, is often what becomes the first step towards that which is truly meaningful, a better version of yourself. A realization, by the way, that's not some denunciation of who you are, right? It's not saying, I'm not good enough or I'm inadequate. I would describe it as the exact opposite. It's thinking enough of yourself to acknowledge that you're better than this. It's saying, yeah, there's a reality where I stay the same, where I don't change, where I allow this to just be my life. But that's not the reality I'm going to choose, because I respect myself too much to continue living with that dissonance between my actions and who I know I truly am. And I think at a deep level, we all understand this. So many times in life, funny enough, we don't change until we have to. Until our backs are completely against the wall. It took me years in my previous professional life to say enough is enough, but ultimately got to that point. I've been there in relationships, been there with my creative work, been there with my finances. And what's especially interesting is that as you grow, evolve, and your goals change, what you expect of yourself changes, grows along with you, you'll find yourself at that place again, and again, and again, and that's good. Listen to it, right? That's your intuition telling you you're ready for more, that something else awaits, that the status quo is no longer sufficient. And there lies the opportunity, right? To recognize and associate that feeling of disgust, as Rohn calls it, with the need to change or an opportunity to change before things blow up or become more difficult than they need to be. Everything in your life has been allowed by you to some extent. That's an important thing to understand. If there's someone in your life that's making it hell, you, to an extent, are responsible for that, right? No one gets your time without your permission. If you're doing things that don't move, motivate, or inspire you, well, the reality is you're choosing those actions. Now, the circumstances may be specific to you, they may be difficult, and I understand that, but are you asking yourself how you can begin moving away from it? How you can put walls between yourself and the things that drag you down? Because the bottom line is, it's very easy to become accustomed to things that are a drain on our lives. The old frog in the boiling water, right? You throw a frog in a pot of hot water, it'll jump right out. But you put it in a pot of cool water, and you slowly but incrementally increase the temperature until it's boiling, the frog won't realize it's burning alive. I think in the same way, we learn to live with that situational disgust. The things we're unhappy with just become the baseline or normal. It becomes regular. And what I love about this Girl Scout cookie story is that light bulb moment where it's like, no, I don't have to accept this. I can take back control. I dictate how I'm going to live, and I know this isn't it. Now, you don't need to have all the answers right away. In fact, you most certainly won't have them. But every journey, as the saying goes, begins with the first step. That's precisely why the moment is so powerful. You don't start moving to that new place until you realize that you want to start moving away from where you are. Rohn talks about disgust being a powerful motivator. That's why. It's the initial leverage you need to create that momentum. To see the gap between where you want to be and where you are. And this is ultimately a call to that realization. Do an audit on yourself and your contentment, the places you find lacking. They're calling for your attention. And it's normal, it's okay, it's part of life, but it's also your opportunity to begin making that change. I like very simple, very straightforward notes to help me parse through this. Simple list, 2 columns. On the left, everything that brings me some level of anxiety or that is a drain on my peace. And on the column on the right, directly across from it, simply what I plan to do about each item. Nothing major, but a tangible, manageable step. Because as Jim Rohn says, you begin to utilize that feeling of disgust or discontent to act. You turn that message into something beautiful, an adventure, some variation of growth. That's where the good stuff is. By the way, it also changes our relationship with those emotions when they emerge. It's no longer, poor me, I'm stuck, my life is hard, and the list goes on and on. No, it's, oh, this doesn't feel good. How can I use it to connect me to something that does? Let's listen to that. I don't like the feeling of making excuses as to why I can't buy the cookies. I don't like the feeling of not having the financial resources. Obviously, can't fix it overnight, but let's make a plan. Let's allow the wheels to hit the road, right? Which, hey, who knows, might be more than I've ever done. This is the magic beginning he alludes to. The confidence being earned, the purpose, the meaning, and ultimately being that we only get results where we place our attention, the outcome we've been looking for. So when you find yourself at that point, when you experience a repetition of disappointment or frustration with your circumstance, let that be the gift it's trying to be. Let it be the reason you will soon wake up a different person, moving towards that which aligns with who you are. Life is perspective. So during the good times, find gratitude. And during the difficult times, find the opportunity. When you have the answers, when you know, be proud of your knowledge. And when you don't, celebrate all the wisdom to come. When the sun is shining, cherish the warmth on your skin, and when it's not, learn to run in the rain. When you're focused, appreciate the clarity. And when life feels chaotic, embrace the chance to manufacture order. When people come into your life, value the ride that you'll share. And when they leave, take note of all they gave along the way. When you win, reflect back on all the hard work that made it possible. And when you lose, take in the lessons that even winning can't provide. When things go as planned, revel in your ability to execute. But when your plans and life's plans diverge, remember that some things are simply outside of your control. And now, this moment, is a chance to identify and utilize the things that are in your control. Henry David Thoreau, it's not what you look at, it's what you see. So see the world as you'd like it to be. Never turning a blind eye to reality, but realizing how much control you have over making reality your own. We are the builders. The world around us merely provides the components and the pieces. And if one were to live as though there were value in every moment, they would inevitably find themselves looking for that value, perhaps even when it was difficult to find, most elusive, when most would hang their heads and walk right by it. I look out my window and see a world that is neither valuable or valueless. I see a blank canvas in which we are tasked with making that decision. Life is a roller coaster ride. It has ups and downs, the obvious and the unexpected. And while some think nothing of the high points and dwell on the low points, there are an abundance of resources, of beauty, of joy, reserved for those who understand how great the highs are and how valuable the lows. Who take what comes, not as walls to live within, but as parts to assemble. Not as antithetical to their hopes and dreams, but as the very foundation they will build those hopes and dreams upon. This world is not for you, just as much as it is entirely yours. It calls for you to be that arbiter. For what you decide will inevitably take shape. There's a haze that circles around our most important moments. And I say haze because often the things that will be most meaningful in our lives, or that will best position us for future transformation or success, they don't accurately depict the value that they ultimately provide. In fact, a lot of the time we get the opposite impression. The answer is deceptively masked as the problem, the thing we are most inclined to run away from. It's often unclear to us that the pain we're experiencing will become the purpose. The loss will become the strength. We can't always see that losing the job will become our reason to find ourselves and the work that will be most meaningful. We don't always understand that losing someone that was a big part of our lives will ultimately create a little space that will bring about connection with others who will lift us up and make us better. We aren't always aware that falling short is incredibly powerful, because it's what most often prompts us to look in the mirror and ask that magical question, how can I be better? Again, we see it in a million different ways, different contexts. The solutions masquerade as problems. Or as has been famously put, the way often presents itself as the obstacle. Which means we have to operate with a sense of awareness and understanding that often eludes us. Sometimes the reality is that it hurts to let go. But if it's not right for you, it hurts to hold on as well. The difference is, when you do find the strength to let go, you simultaneously create space for the things that will make your life better. And I've noticed, as I've navigated this crazy place well into my 30s, that the discomfort I've experienced in the past, it rarely utilizes my future as its benchmark. Right? When I'm uncomfortable, it's because something has gone awry in the now. This moment hurts. In this moment, I feel less than. In this moment, I feel lost. In this moment, I am X, Y, or Z. It's all generally immediate, emotive responses to what's happening. Which is why I advocate so strongly for pausing, pulling back, taking a breath, and assessing the whole picture in totality. See, I've made decisions in my life that have set me back a year, right? That destroyed me emotionally, totally altered my plans. And I look back on some of those decisions now, with all the pain they brought, and I think, was there another way? Did I make the right move? Did I need to endure all that? And I'm not going to pretend, I know how some parallel universe would have unfolded if I acted differently. But as I reflect back, I still think that I made the right choice. I don't see another way. Sometimes there are no easy decisions. Sometimes life is about choosing the least bad option. I've talked about having to step back in order to leap forward, or stepping sideways in order to ultimately advance. Sometimes the thing we need just looks like discomfort, the sheep in wolves' clothing, where you have to seek out monsters in order to destroy the ones that live inside of you. The reason, one, I think this is so important, and two, I'm so passionate about sharing it with others is because, again, our instincts drive us away from the things we need most. That's just how it is. Humans are more emotional than we are rational. And there have been plenty of times where, just being reminded, Eddie, I get that this is challenging, but where do you most want to go? Eddie, you're playing defensive, which I'm sure minimizes problems now, but will never propel you forward with your career. Eddie, you're dragging your feet and calling it perfectionism. Could it in fact be fear? Right? I've had a lot of these little, and sometimes not so little, epiphanies over the course of the last decade. When people ask me about speaking, which being that I do it for a living would make sense, right? Tips or insights, whatever it is, I'm being completely sincere when I say that I wish I had some formula I could propose, right? That would make you go from 0 to 60 in 3 months. But the truth is, the biggest bang for your buck is stepping right into the terror. The thing you're most inclined to run from. And that was it for me, right? Sheer terror, actually shaking. Nights where I stayed awake, reciting keynotes into hotel mirrors. Couldn't eat. And I'd, wrap up, the event would be over, I'd just go back to the room and collapse in bed because I hadn't slept the night before, right? That's how it started. And the more times I didn't give myself a way out, the more I saw past the fear, put emotions aside, and reiterated to myself that underneath all that discomfort was value, the better I became. The less dramatic each speaking engagement became. And the terror evolved into excitement. Eddie, please get through this, eventually evolved into, Eddie, how can you make this speaking engagement more exciting, more fun, more captivating than the last one? Right, I recently spoke at the MGM Grand Arena, and it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I'm sure you can imagine, not necessarily because of the event, but it prompted me to think back to all those times I wanted to say no so badly, with all my heart, with every fiber of my being, but didn't. It was just a proud feeling. Like you get those moments from time to time where everything becomes a single snapshot. It all makes sense. Right? Because there were times I truly didn't understand why I was moving forward. I just did. I just knew I'd burn the boats. There were no other options. And when you collect that W, you quickly remember. And so all this to emphasize the very important point that it may not be speaking at the MGM Grand Arena that's your North Star. Maybe it's something totally different. But I want to remind you that the road to wherever you most want to be is not perfectly paved and decorated with flowers. It won't always be sunny with clear blue skies. And to take it even further, the paths that are paved with flowers and clear blue skies are often the wrong ones. In a world of trade-offs, we know that the best things often require the greatest sacrifice. The beautiful things are often derived from a willingness to endure prior turbulence. And should you find yourself amidst all that, in the thick of it, it's essential to know that should you choose to do so, you can transform the chaos into something incredible. Realistically, that pain of loss, we can't do anything about, right? Nature has made it so that we feel every sense of what's been taken away. But nature doesn't do such a good job of reminding us of the infinite value that can now move into our souls, be used to open our eyes so that we may see the world as we've never seen it before. There is such power in the ability to view that fleeting emotion, the discomfort of now, in terms of what it will ultimately become. As the saying goes, the hardest thing and the right thing are often the same thing. So be your own judge, your own critic. Decide what best points you to that place amongst the stars you long to be. Just understand that the road won't be pain-free, and those who try to make it so miss out on a lot of the brilliance available to us. That haze that tries to conceal what's most important is only effective if we keep our eyes closed, if we aren't honest with ourselves. But if you know, one, what's most important, and two, are committed to one day arriving there, the short-term obstacles become a relatively small price to pay.